In the breathtaking city of Tudor, where luxury met beauty, lived Yemeni, a man of charm and ambition. He had everything a man could wish for: a thriving business, expensive cars, and, most importantly, a beautiful and loving family. His wife, Anita, was admired by all, not just for her beauty but for the happiness they seemed to radiate together. Their daughter, Simi, was the light of their home, a girl full of laughter and innocence. They lived in a grand house with a wide balcony overlooking the city, where the sunset painted the skies in shades of gold. Their life seemed perfect, a dream others envied. Yemeni worked hard to provide the best for his family, and Anita enjoyed the life of comfort he gave her. Their love appeared unbreakable, their joy unshakable. But even in the most beautiful homes, darkness can creep in unnoticed, waiting for the right moment to strike. The first signs of trouble came like whispers in the wind, small, almost unnoticeable at first. Yemeni's business, once thriving, began to show cracks. A few bad investments, a struggling economy, and betrayals from those he trusted drained his finances. The first blow came when he had to sell one of his luxury cars. He assured Anita it was only temporary, that things would get better. But things didn't get better. One by one, the things that defined their wealth slipped away. The second car was sold. Then the house was at risk. The once grand lifestyle began to shrink, and Anita's patience thinned with it. She no longer smiled as much, no longer looked at him with admiration. Instead, she sighed in frustration, avoiding him in the house. Yemeni noticed but chose to believe she would understand, that love would be enough. But for Anita, love was tied to wealth, and without it, the foundation of their marriage crumbled. Yemeni's financial troubles deepened. The weight of debt pressed upon him, suffocating every attempt he made to recover. Calls from creditors became more frequent, and the house that once stood as a fortress of security now felt like a prison of uncertainty. His business, which once thrived under his leadership, was crumbling before his eyes. Anita's attitude shifted from concern to frustration. The woman who once held his hand through difficulties now withdrew, avoiding conversations about their struggles. She no longer sat with him at dinner, and her laughter, which once filled their home, faded into silence. Simi, too young to understand fully, watched with innocent confusion as the warmth in their home disappeared. One evening, Anita packed a suitcase. Yemeni watched in disbelief, his voice trembling. "Where are you going?" he asked, hoping for an answer that wouldn't shatter him. "I can't do this anymore," she said coldly. "I didn't sign up for poverty." Yemeni's heart pounded. "Anita, please. Things will get better. Just stay with me." But Anita had already made up her mind. She left that night without looking back. Anita found solace in the arms of another man, Chike. He was wealthy, powerful, and everything Yemeni could no longer be. He welcomed her with open arms, showering her with gifts and promises of a future free from struggle. At first, she felt relief. The luxury she craved was restored, and she convinced herself she had made the right decision. Yet, something gnawed at her, the image of Yemeni and Simi, abandoned and alone. Meanwhile, Yemeni struggled to pick up the pieces. He drowned in sorrow but refused to let his daughter suffer. He became both mother and father, learning to braid Simi's hair, cook her favorite meals, and comfort her through the nights when she cried for her mother. "Will Mama come back?" Simi asked one night, her small fingers clutching his hand. Yemeni swallowed the lump in his throat. "Maybe one day," he whispered, knowing deep down that even if Anita returned, things would never be the same. Days turned into weeks, and Yemeni found himself at Anita's new home, begging her to return. He stood at the grand gates of Chike's mansion, hoping she would see reason. "Anita, come home," he pleaded. "Simi needs you." She looked at him from the doorstep, arms folded, eyes indifferent. "I've moved on, Yemeni. You should too." He took a deep breath, searching for any sign of the woman he once loved. "This isn't you, Anita. You're not this cold." Chike emerged from inside, smirking. "She's with me now. Leave before I call security." Anita didn't protest. She didn't move. She simply watched as her husband, her family, walked away, shoulders heavy with heartbreak. That night, Yemeni held Simi close, whispering a silent promise: "We will survive without her." Raising a child alone was no easy task. Yemeni had no choice but to adapt. He took on extra jobs, waking before dawn and returning long after Simi had gone to bed. He learned to do laundry, cook, and even sew when Simi's clothes needed mending. Despite the exhaustion, he found purpose in being a father. He was there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, and every school event. And though it was hard, He made sure Simi never felt the absence of a mother. But at night, when the house was silent, loneliness crept in. He missed the laughter, the companionship, the love. And yet, he refused to let it break him. Simi's innocence shielded her from the full weight of their reality. But as she grew, questions became harder to answer. "Does Mama not love us anymore?" she asked one evening, her big eyes searching his for truth. Yemeni hesitated before pulling her into a hug. "Love is complicated," he said. "But I love you enough for both of us." That night, as Simi slept, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if Anita ever thought about them. Chike was everything Anita thought she wanted. Wealthy, confident, generous. But there was one thing he lacked: loyalty. At first, she ignored the warning signs. The late nights. The hushed phone calls. The unfamiliar perfume lingering on his clothes. She convinced herself she was imagining things. But deep down, a familiar feeling began to stir: regret. Anita soon realized that wealth came with a price. Chike's affections were conditional, his kindness performative. She was no longer a wife but a trophy, a decoration to display when convenient. One evening, she found another woman's belongings in their bedroom. She confronted him, expecting an apology. Instead, he laughed. "You're here for the money, Anita. Don't pretend otherwise." Her heart clenched. This wasn't love. This was a transaction. And she was losing more than she had gained. Simi had learned to stop asking about her mother. She had also learned to dry her own tears. Yemeni noticed the change in her, how she no longer cried at night, how she buried herself in books instead of playing outside. She was growing up too fast, learning too soon that life wasn't always fair. But Yemeni refused to let bitterness steal her joy. He reminded her daily, "We have each other. That's enough." And even on the hardest days, they believed it. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Yemeni worked tirelessly, juggling multiple jobs to provide for Simi. Though the burden was heavy, he never let it show. He woke before sunrise, packed Simi's lunch, braided her hair, and walked her to school before heading to work. At night, exhaustion clouded him, but he still found the strength to help her with her homework, read her stories, and remind her that she was loved. He refused to let her feel abandoned. He refused to let her suffer because of Anita's selfishness. And most of all, he refused to break. At first, Anita basked in the luxury of her new life. Chike took her to expensive restaurants, dressed her in designer clothes, and paraded her at lavish events. She enjoyed the attention, convincing herself she had made the right choice. But behind the glamour, cracks began to form. Chike had no interest in deep conversations. He didn't care about her thoughts, her feelings, or her dreams. She was merely another possession. Late at night, when she lay in a cold bed beside a man who barely spoke to her, she found herself thinking of Yemeni and Simi. And for the first time, regret began to settle in. Anita tried to silence the guilt, but it gnawed at her. Every time she saw a mother with her child, she thought of Simi. Every time she heard a man laugh with his wife, she thought of Yemeni. She had convinced herself that money would make her happy. But happiness had never been about wealth, it had been about family. She missed the warmth of home, the sound of Simi's laughter, the way Yemeni would hold her when she was upset. She had traded love for comfort. And now, she was beginning to realize that comfort meant nothing without love. The first time it happened, Anita told herself it was a mistake. She had questioned Chike about his whereabouts, and in response, he had grabbed her wrist, tightly. His face was cold, his eyes dark. "Don't ever question me," he had said. She had been too shocked to respond. But as time passed, the warnings turned into insults. The insults turned into shoves. And the shoves turned into slaps. Chike was not the man she had imagined. He was cruel, controlling, and dangerous. And she had walked right into his trap. Chike never bothered to hide his infidelity. He brought different women into their home, treating Anita as if she were invisible. She tried to argue, to fight for her place, but he only laughed. "You knew what this was," he said. "You wanted money, and I gave it to you. Don't expect love." His words cut deeper than any slap. She had left a man who truly loved her for a man who saw her as nothing more than a disposable toy. And now, she was stuck. One night, Anita confronted him. "I won't live like this," she said, her voice trembling. Chike smirked. "Then leave." She hesitated. Where would she go? She had no money, no job, no home. She had thrown away her family for him. Sensing her hesitation, he laughed. That's what I thought. Then, without warning, he struck her. Pain exploded through her cheek, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that followed. She had made the biggest mistake of her life. The abuse became routine. Some days, it was words. Other days, it was blows. She was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by wealth but drowning in misery. She had no friends, no family, no one to turn to. She thought of Yemeni every day. She thought of how he had begged her to stay, how he had loved her unconditionally. She thought of Simi and wondered if her daughter even remembered her. And for the first time, she wished she could turn back time. Meanwhile, Simi was thriving. Though she missed her mother, she no longer cried for her. Yemeni had filled the emptiness, becoming both father and mother. He taught her strength, resilience, and self-worth. She excelled in school, made friends, and learned to smile again. She had once wondered why her mother had left. Now, she no longer cared. Despite his love for Simi, life was still a struggle. There were days he barely had enough to feed them. But no matter how hard things got, he never gave up. He worked tirelessly, saving every penny he could. One day, he vowed, they would rise above their struggles. And when that day came, he would make sure Anita saw just how strong they had become without her. Simi grew into a bright young girl, wise beyond her years. She saw the sacrifices her father made, the way he put her above everything else. And she loved him all the more for it. "Papa," she said one night, "you're the best father in the world." Yemeni smiled, fighting back tears. "And you're the best daughter." They had lost Anita, but they had gained something more, an unbreakable bond. And that was enough. Anita sat in the grand but cold mansion, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The bruises on her face told a story of pain and regret. She had traded love for wealth, thinking money would make her happy. But now, she realized the truth, she had lost everything that truly mattered. She reached for her phone, hesitating before dialing Yemeni's number. She wanted to hear his voice, to apologize, to beg for a second chance. But when the call connected, her hands trembled. "Hello?" Yemeni's deep voice came through, calm and strong. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "Who is this?" he asked again. "It's me, Anita," she finally whispered. A long silence followed before he spoke again. "What do you want?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I want to come home." But his next words shattered her completely. "You are no longer welcome here." The line went dead. Anita sat in the darkness of her luxurious home, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Chike was out, probably with another woman. The maids ignored her, treating her like a ghost. She thought of Simi, wondering if her daughter even remembered her. Did she still miss her? Did she hate her? The silence of the house was deafening. She had once left Yemeni because she feared poverty. Now, she realized that wealth meant nothing without love. And she had lost the only people who had ever truly loved her. Anita's nightmare worsened. Chike had stopped pretending to care. Now, he no longer hid his affairs, nor did he hold back his anger. One evening, she found him in their bedroom with another woman. She had seen enough and finally snapped. "I won't live like this anymore," she screamed. Chike looked at her with amusement. "Then leave." But she had nowhere to go. When she tried to argue, his hand met her face with a force that sent her crashing to the floor. "You're nothing without me," he sneered before walking away. She lay there, tears falling onto the cold marble floor. How had she let her life come to this? The bruises on Anita's skin faded, but the ones in her heart remained. She avoided Chike as much as possible, afraid of provoking his anger. She thought of Yemeni every day. She thought of how gentle he had been, how much he had loved her. She had been too blind to see his worth. Now, she longed for the life she had thrown away. But it was too late. Chike no longer cared about hiding his disgust for her. "You used to be beautiful," he scoffed one night as she sat quietly at dinner. "Now, you're just pathetic." The words cut deep, but Anita had no strength left to fight back. Later that night, as she lay in bed alone, she made a decision. She couldn't stay here anymore. Even if she had nowhere to go, she had to leave before Chike destroyed her completely. To all who cherish timeless tales, thank you for journeying with us. If this story stirred your soul, please like, share, and subscribe to O2X Movie Folktales. Your support fuels our quest to unearth legends. Episode 2 arrives soon, where deeper shadows and older secrets await. Stay tuned.